is document number 21, Federal Register. Caution or warning statement to avoid injury to man or animals. Available information does not indicate that herbicides containing 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T or MCPA are highly toxic to man. Therefore, their labels are not required to bear the word poison, the skull and crossbones, or an antidote statement. However, they may cause irritation to the skin and eyes, and products containing the free acids or inorganic salts of 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T or MCPA in concentrations of 20% and above should bear caution statements such as avoid inhaling dust, avoid contact with skin, eyes, or clothing. Organic esters or amine salts of these herbicides require a caution such as, quote, avoid contact with skin, eyes, or clothing, end of quote. So this is 1959, and Alvin Young had stated in his reports that the butyl ester was not available to applicators in the civilian area. And this is 1959, and the butyl ester is available, as you can see in the CFR. Document number 22 is just the 1957 calendar year for the FT410. And in this year, in 1957, the number was even different. It was for the 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. It wasn't called 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T in 57. That nomenclature came out in 1958. And this number, 820587, was a previous number, and it was called weed killers. And you'll see in the pesticide registrations that weed killers is synonymous with 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. And we see it shipped to Panama and Panama Canal, as well as other places. And so if you go to document number 23 and you click on the pesticide registration labels, and then it will open all the pesticide registration labels that I found that have 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T inside the chemicals, and the trade names are, Dragon Brush Killer from Dragon Chemical Core Company, Kimpar, and so forth. So you can look through all of these and see there were very many names and different companies that made it. Here's the butyl ester that's made. It was canceled in 88, but it was the original approval date was 61. And so anyway, you can take a look at those and download that file if you need it. Document number 24 has been referred to as report number 16 in some claims that I have seen. So you might have seen that and looking for report number 16. That's this report, and it's from the Georgia Forest Research Council on 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T and related chemicals. And that was done in the southeastern United States. I think the most important thing that I picked up in this report, because I already knew a lot of the stuff that it talks about, but you might find things in here that I didn't see. So, please read all the documents that you possibly can. The drift damage may not be strictly local. Cotton, a very susceptible crop, has been often damaged 3 to 4 to 5 miles away from where 2,4-D or 2,4,5-T is being applied. One field 35 miles away was reported damage though such instances are rare. So let's think about that. We lived in Panama Canal Zone, which was a 50 by 10 mile strip of land with bases on both sides spraying these chemicals. These chemicals were there. We saw spraying going on everywhere. And we were susceptible to that spray by the drift, by just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, or having to be in the jungle doing operations and not knowing that that area was just sprayed. And also 2,4-D was used in Gatun Lake, which was our water source since 1948. And this report number 6, document number 24, also says that two chemicals, 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, were first synthesized in the early 1940s. The first developed 2,4-D was initially found to be a plant growth regulator. The development of 2,4,5-T followed closely. Again, when they shipped plant growth regulators, we don't know exactly what chemical that was, but I have a suspicion it was 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T that continued to ship after 1978. Here it says over here about 2,4,5-T. 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T are auxins or growth regulators. So there you go. I mean, how much more clear could it be? Remember on the 1976 Aberdeen test that they did in Panama, they said that phenoxy herbicides were used there. And here we have, the phenoxy herbicides of 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. Document number 25 is important. This is the technical manual, the same one that we saw in 1970. The TM 5-629 is the Army number, and then there's the Air Force number and the Navy number. This is just a later version of that. And this is just a later version of that manual. And notice in here under weed control and plant growth regulation, they're shipping the plant growth regulators and herbicides to Panama in 1989. We know that from the shipping records. And here they're talking about using them. They also talk in here about still using 2,4-D on base as well. So they're still using herbicides and they're still shipping herbicides. We see here's 2,4-D. They're still using 2,4-D and other kinds of herbicides and pesticides in the 1980s. And we do see herbicides and growth regulators. And as we saw in the other documents earlier, that growth regulators were 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. Or at least 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T are growth regulators. And so in 77, when they stopped shipping 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T, we do think that it was still being shipped, but maybe it was being shipped under the nomenclature of growth regulators, which seems to be synonymous with 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T. Document number 26 is an Agent Orange Investigative Report Series number 3 under VA contract. So the VA paid for this report to be written. And this is one in a series of reports. This person wrote reports on Panama Canal Zone, the investigations into the allegations of Agent Orange in the Panama Canal Zone. And he also wrote reports on Korea, Vietnam, Thailand, you name it. Okinawa. And who is this person? It is Alvin Young, PhD. And in this report, in all his reports, most of them anyway, they say this report is part of an Agent Orange investigative report series and should be considered as an amendable or living document. If additional authenticated documents or records are found that address the topic of this report, a reevaluation of the conclusions may be necessary. I've given these shipment records to the VA since 2015, and so far they haven't reevaluated Panama, but we are getting a little closer, so we're hopeful. And there are some wins. If you scroll down to the bottom of these documents, there are some wins for Panama using those shipment records, showing that 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T were indeed in Panama. So as you look through his report, he's trying to tell us that we don't know what we're talking about. He says that we allegation number 1 was Agent Orange was extensively used in Panama and the Canal Zone 62 through 75. We have records of 2,4-D and 2,4,5-T shipped during those years to Panama, and we do know that the notes in the commerce records say that the end user was the country that it was shipped to, and all the other countries got their own. So we do know that Agent Orange was shipped to Panama, 100 to 200 drums in 1968 to be evaluated for jungle vegetation for use in the war in Vietnam. That is a fact that Charles Bartlett, and you can see that in these documents as well. Charles Bartlett testified he was a Dietrich employee, and he testified that about 200 barrels were shipped in 1968 to Panama and were left behind. Allegation 3 was the excess drums of Agent Orange remaining after tests and evaluations were completed were left behind and used casually around various military installations for Panama to control weeds and shrubs. Well, we have a picture in spring of 2020 of about 9 old, but appear to be old Agent Orange barrels with orange stripes on them in front of the old quarters at Fort Sherman. You can see those here as well. Allegation 4 says U.S. troops stationed in various locations in Panama observed the spraying of Agent Orange by aircraft, and many were involved in ground spraying of the herbicide in both military and civilian areas. Well, you can look at my channel, my YouTube channel, czveterans.com, or you can get there at Agent Orange in Panama. And at Travels of Orange will get you there as well. And we have veterans that were stationed in Panama that sprayed Agent Orange around their sites. Allegation 5 says Agent Orange drums and remaining residuals were disposed of by burial. Well, as you see in the manuals, that's exactly how we were told to get rid of it, was if you had an empty barrel, you were supposed to bury it away from water sources. So to tell us that none of these allegations are true is questionable. In this report, Alvin Young references the DOD's report as proof that it wasn't in Panama. That report is called The History of the U.S. Department of Defense Programs for the Testing, Evaluation, and Storage of Tactical Herbicides. It's available from the Armed Forces Pest Management Literature Retrieval System, and it was written by Alvin Young. So he's a circular reference in all his reports that he writes about Panama, Korea, Thailand, Okinawa, etc. He points to this report by the DOD, and he is also the author of the other report that also says in the beginning that if any documents are found, that this is an amendable document, and yet they ignore the proof. Document number 27 is the history of the U.S. Department of Defense programs for the testing, evaluation, and storage of tactical herbicides, written in December 2006, submitted by Alvin Young, PhD. So again, he's the circular reference for the proof that it wasn't in Panama when he himself testified that there is no difference in the dioxin content. In fact, the dioxin content that went prior to 1970 down to Panama had a much, much higher dioxin content by his own testimony.